But we're seeing across the board, almost all our customers leaning in pretty heavily. I don't see anyone today saying, I don't think this is going to happen. If anything, what we are seeing is that customers now are saying, hey, I would like to do this. I'd like to do this next. Can we think about this? So there's actually more of a leaning in that I'm seeing than I've seen over the last 20 plus years. This is Githesh Ramamurthy, Chairman and CEO of CCC Intelligent Solutions, and this is the future of insurance.
Githesh, it's great to sit down with you and hear a little bit about some of the things that are going on at CCC, helping to move the industry forward. But I want to understand you before we do that. So can you just give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I went to grad school for computer science and a computer scientist also by training. And I've spent really many years really focused on bringing the intersection of solving large, complex business problems by applying technology, solutions, and obviously people are a big part of the equation.
Yeah.
That's in a nutshell what I've been doing for the last several decades.
And so that makes you a fellow accidental insurance industry person. I always say it's either like your parents were agents or you got into it by accident. So you fall into, I think, what the majority of us have. But I do appreciate anytime I run into an engineer, I always say, like, you tell an engineer something's impossible and in their mind, they're thinking, yeah, right now. And so going on to solve that. So it's great, to have engineering talent thinking about the industry. On that, for those who don't know who CCC is, maybe you can give us a little flavor.
Sure. CCC has a platform that really works on digitizing the multi-trillion-dollar P&C insurance economy. That means when you think about our mission is to keep people's lives moving forward when it matters the most. So as an example, an auto claim, when that happens, is a pretty traumatic event for people. So the other question is, how do you deliver an incredible experience for someone who's really been through a very rough situation?
Yeah.
And in order to do that, that means you've got to have insurance carriers, repair facilities, parts providers, rental companies, a whole host of people have to work together to deliver that incredible experience for that policyholder, right? And that's really where we come in, is that we provide tools, technology, software, artificial intelligence, a lot of these capabilities to help coordinate the work of insurers. That's 300 insurance companies on our platform, 18 out of the top 20 carriers, 27,000 repair facilities, ranging from the smallest repair facilities that might have 3 or 4 employees to the largest that have 25 to 30,000 employees.
Yeah.
Parts providers, car companies. So it's a whole ecosystem that you really have to work across to make this happen.
Yeah, I think it's very easy for people in the industry, probably that aren't living in that exact space every day, to think it's just the auto insurer and the claimant or the insured, or maybe the agent as well. But it's actually like this really complex interwoven supply chain. And I want to hit on this a little bit more. I got a couple other questions to ask you first, but it is really complex and it's very easy, not very easy, but it's easy to solve for a particular piece of the puzzle, but it's almost like, I wouldn't say worthless, but if the rest of the system isn't tied together and solved with the same tools, you're missing so much of ultimately what we need to achieve for the customer, for efficiency, for results, all of it.
I think that's exactly right. And in fact, there's actually even a mathematical way to model that complexity, right? So when you think of even basic graph theory and you look at the number of people involved, number of companies involved, number of systems involved, that actually grows at a complexity level of n squared minus n. That means with every, when you double the number of connections, you're quadrupling the level of complexity that's involved. And that exponential increase in complexity, when you have all of these different participants, thousands of decisions that have to be made by tens of thousands of people, when you look at the overall volume, that insight is exactly what creates the complexity. that people are facing.
And I think for any adjusters listening, they just found out there was actually a mathematical equation for how painful that like trying to navigate that complexity can be. But I want to pick into this a little bit more, but a bit more on CCC. Interesting timings. We're recording this just as ITC is going on. It'll come out a couple weeks later. But ITC, like a time to think about investing in the space, and InsurTech boom. ITC last year was a very different investment and IPO kind of market than we're in right now. And sort of between the two, closer to last year's, CCC went public. I should say went public again. I'm curious, we're now like kind of at the 1 year mark for the company being back on the public markets. What have you seen since then? Obviously, like a huge shift in the notion of investing in the space. What's that meant to you? Has it changed anything for the company or how you look at the space now that you are public again? And maybe you can give people some of that, the backstory, because you were public, went private, and came back to the public markets after almost 2 decades, right? It was a while, or I guess I forget what it was.
Yeah, look, we'll focus on today, right?
Yeah.
We've been public for about a year. And the reason we went public is really one very fundamental reason. What we see is that the pace of innovation accelerating pretty substantially over the next several years. So the investments we're making in artificial intelligence, in the network, in providing tools for casualty, connecting banks, connecting car companies, telematics data. So we see a substantial amount of innovation. We see that pace accelerating. And what we wanted to do was to make sure that as a public company, we have the capital structure to be able to continue to actually increase the pace of innovation for our customers.
Yeah.
And that has led to a handful of, new solutions, like, for example, what we're doing in artificial intelligence. We acquired a company in the subrogation space, a great team, very unique artificial intelligence models for dealing with an age-old problem of subrogation, but applying a very modern twist to it. Another example are diagnostics and calibration of cars equipped with cameras, sensors, is extraordinarily complex.
Yeah.
How do you repair them? How do you, what should you pay for the damage? So these are examples that we've been able to actually introduce just in the time that we've been public. But yes, we did go take the company public in '96, and we operated as a public company for many years before we went private. And we're in that phase today of being a public company again.
Yeah, I mean, it is, when you laid out, it's a really interesting time, I think, from an opportunity standpoint. There's a lot of disruptive ideas, and I mean that in a good way, things that, have the potential to really shift the market, and the pace that those things are entering and reaching scale or having potential impact does feel like it's accelerating. But that's even setting aside what's going on the, cars and buildings and all the things that get adjusted. The pace of change there, like you said, on the ADAS side, like the, needing to recalibrate all the sensors and everything. I remember when I was a kid growing up, you could fix most cars with like pantyhose and a wire hanger. You at least make it drivable, right? Maybe some duct tape every now and then. But the complexity of even the most basic vehicle on the market is wild by yesterday's standards. So to keep up with that and what it takes to adjust that, and the tools and vendors and everything needed, I can imagine the demand's quite high.
Well, I mean, to be very specific, right? A bumper, for example, is no longer a bumper.
Yeah, it was just a plastic cap. It was just metal before.
Yes, it had, few basic components. Today, you could have sensors, you could have cameras, you could have so much just in one component, in just one component. And so when you think about the people that are involved, from insurers, repairers, parts providers, all the people involved, you've got about 1 billion days in wait time just in the United States in putting people back in cars after an accident. 1 billion days are elapse. And when you look at the complexity, the individual and nuanced decisions people have to make, hundreds of decisions with a fairly complex set of issues. Should I total this car? Should I repair this car? Today we can do that with a single photo, and an AI can help make those decisions. But the average car might have 20,000 to 30,000 unique components and parts.
Yeah.
And so there's so many other factors. When you look at the medical claims associated with this, that's got a massive amount of complexity. And that's really what, I think my personal view is, can we design and deliver capability for the industry that makes that frontline decision-making process a heck of a lot easier and brings down the cognitive load for the person making those decisions.
Yeah. Well, look, you kind of segued to what I want to get into is, we're talking about physical damage a lot, like the property side of it, the damage to the car, and you mentioned the medical side, and casualty is a huge component to losses, people getting injured in these accidents or slip and falls or whatever it might be. And that's more my space. When I was running claims, we didn't have an auto book. We were doing specialty lines and GL, and, things that drove casualty losses quite a bit. So I'm curious about that, because it does feel like, the digital transformation, the digital tools that came online, especially in COVID, because those were such, physical claims were such an in-person adjusting job. It feels like casualty's always sort of been ignored, and it was more like, well, that's for experts, and you get your best adjusters on it and they'll figure it out. But this is where the nuclear verdicts are. This is where social inflation, medical inflation is coming in. We've got our own inflation on auto physical damage as well. But casualty is just this, it's like a cauldron of getting worse without the right tools. And I know that's something CCC has started to address, and I'm curious to dig into that, because I do feel like it's long overdue. The tools have been on the physical damage side. What are you seeing in casualty, and how are you able to start affecting something for us to do other than just throwing a more expensive attorney on the claim sooner to fight back against, the more expensive attorney from the outside?
Well, you threw a lot of things out there, right?
Because I'm worked up about it, if you can't tell.
Yes, that is very clear. But when you look at it, what you really have to start is, what is the basis of truth? What is the ground truth, right? So you have to start with the injury itself.
Yeah.
What caused the injury? That means you have to look at the physics of the accident itself. That means if a passenger vehicle collided with an SUV, one weighing 6,000 pounds, one weighing 2,500 pounds, and they were struck at an angle, what were the impact forces on the body? So the basic physics of the accident. And we can impute a lot of that today from artificial intelligence, from the photos of the accident. And we've been able to see, we collect about 500 million photos a year. And so there's a lot of learning as you correlate medical claims. So you have to start with the ground truth of what is an injury. And because at the end of it, there's a person who is hurt, who's got to be taken care of. And then you've got third-party claims, you got first-party claims, and both have some differences. But the ground truth about the accident, the physics of the accident, the science underneath it should be the same. So we start with getting down to the science of the accident, and then use that to inform all of the other components involved, right? Whether it's the medical bill, all the other components, how should you process it? So there's a lot of other things, connecting providers. So to us, that was really the aha moment and the insight, because we learned a lot by processing, over $1 trillion of historical physical damage claims. And we've been applying that for the last several years to medical claims now.
So is this like, based on the physics, we would expect these are the kinds of injuries you'd have or wouldn't have? So if we're seeing, X being presented that doesn't really fit with the nature of the accident, or maybe we're not seeing something presented and we should be worried that it will come with an attorney, or maybe someone's getting worse because they're not seeking treatment?
Yeah, look, our job is to provide that information in an easily consumable manner.
Yeah.
That means frontline adjusters and our customers, employees, as they look at this, they have the best possible information in their hands to make those judgments. This is what I was saying, is that the power of, the nuanced power of digital capability is, how do you put something in the hands of people so that they have the best information in their hands? It might be scene information, it might be weather information, that might have a correlation to that intersection information. That might, how do you make all of this available in a consumable manner so someone can really say, I have the pieces that I need, without spending hours and hours and hours to find this information? And we think that is really critical to deliver the service to the consumer and for our customers to be able to manage this process.
It does sound like, it's a very like historically APD tool set, but you have the usage of the auto physical damage right? But you have the usage, so translating it over onto the casualty side. Is that the way that it works?
Yes. Historically, we've built tools for auto physical damage. That means, a car, should this car be totaled? Should this car not be totaled? By the way, also, as you know, having operated a claims function, you actually have to start at first notice of loss. You have to say, what are the components? And today, that data might be coming in from telematics. It might be actually streamed data coming from a car that says, this has been the speed of the accident, this is the impact of the accident. It could be someone calling it in. Increasingly, what we've seen over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, has been a massive shift in where the consumer is involved. And we saw this pre-COVID with, for example, mobile capabilities. So until then, mobile was used. But what we saw in the last 3 years is mobile usage go from 10% to 20% to 30% of all claims, where the consumer is actually taking the count, getting a link, and we're guiding the consumer through a link to take the right photos around the car. The AI is guiding them. And then we can actually start that process right from that component, because that then informs, how do I handle auto physical damage? Should I total? Should I repair? Should I route this to my partner repair facility? What parts should I order? Or all the way through to medical claims, to subrogation, to payments. So we think all of these components have got to be really brought together across the industry.
Well, I want to ask you about the industry in terms of what's holding us back. So definitely adoption has moved up. And I think that's one of the things, the positives of COVID, is that it's brought more digital adoption from customers, from carriers. But what do you think still holds the industry back from this sort of, projecting out from the pieces that you're starting to put in place in the past few years?
I would say, to actually start with the premise, I would say, I'm not sure the industry gets enough credit for all the things it's doing. This is so different from ordering a pair of sneakers online, where you have one SKU, you order, you've got, transportation. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of decisions involved. So I feel that many of our customers, in terms of the complexity they're dealing with, there's a lot of complexity. So when you look at the transformation, you also have, regulations that are state by state. So one of the things you have to be very thoughtful about is, when we deliver technology, when we deliver functionality, that we are doing it in a way that is the compliance aspects that many of our customers deal with, that we are very cognizant of the compliance issues. At the same time, we're trying to reduce that cognitive load for that frontline person, to really, at every facet, whether you're a first notice of loss rep, whether you're an adjuster, whether you are a subrogation specialist, or for that matter, if you're a repair facility technician, you see a car in front of you. You might have just seen one of those cars. You might see that car 3 times a year.
Right.
That particular variation of that vehicle. You might see it only 3 times a year. That means we have to put in the hands of that person, here's all the things you need to actually repair the vehicle. here's how you disable the high voltage rail, right?
Yep.
You know, it's an 800-volt vehicle. You know, you're going to have to do it very differently from a vehicle that's got, you know, 110 volts going through it, right?
Or vehicle to vehicle. I mean, EVs, they're never in the same place. Some of them you have to take out the rear seat. I mean, they're all over the place.
Exactly. So again, it is really bringing forth. So when you ask your question about what's holding the industry back, my view is really there are really two things from a challenge standpoint that our customers are facing. First and foremost is complexity. So it was a very complex process to start with.
Yeah.
And now, with the addition of complexity of vehicles, complexity of laws, complexity of regulation, so that complexity is increasing. At the same time, the talent, is retiring from the industry. To use the example, you might have had someone who's got 30 years of experience, right? As more people retire from the industry and people start to move, how do you bring that level of knowledge, that level of capability? And talent is an issue that we are seeing across the board.
Yeah.
Our insurance customers, our repair customers, our OEM customers, our parts providers, all our customers are seeing talent as an issue that we don't think is going to go away.
Yeah.
That means, how do you then provide capability for people still to function at the level of someone with 30 years of experience? So we think those two are, to use your term, that is the challenge of the day.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, in the last, literally in the last 12 to 18 months, a third challenge has popped up, a very dramatic challenge that nobody predicted, and that's inflation.
Yeah. Inflation on top of supply chain constraints, and so you can't get what you need, and if you could, you're spending dramatically more, and then there's more price wars for it. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult.
So inflation in parts, inflation in labor, inflation in addition to sheer supply chain constraints that we've all heard about, right?
Yeah.
So these three are continuing to add a lot of complexity to the industry as a whole, and that's really what I think people are challenged with today.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate those are very macro level things, rather than something that's inherently wrong or bad or whatever in insurance companies themselves. That it's not, the phrase like making a rod for your own back. It's not that we're doing this to ourselves. These are real, constraints and challenges we face. But you didn't list anything that says, and we're incapable of facing them, which I think hopefully everyone listening is feeling that like we can still get through this. There's no impossibility in our makeup.
In fact, I would say, Brian, we're seeing the opposite. We are seeing that when we can deliver a solution, customers are adopting it pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
For example, we introduced a solution called Smart Estimate that takes photos, pre-populates what's the damage to the vehicle, pre-populates it, basically jump-starting that estimate. We introduced, some 3 years ago, right, 2-3 years ago. And people started using it and started to see, wow, I can actually see AI in real work and start to adopt it. And pretty much all our customers, most of our customers adopted it pretty quickly. Yeah. And then as we delivered artificial intelligence capabilities, and it was practical, it really made a difference, we started to see people adopt it. So I think the other challenge a lot of our customers face is how do they take their internal systems that have been built over sometimes
decades,
5, 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
How do you take a lot of information that is in those systems, couple it with a modern platform, like a cloud-based platform with, some of the things that we deliver? How do you integrate those two, but deliver a seamless experience to your own employees? And then in turn, you deliver how that experience translates into a wonderful experience for the policyholder, right? Yeah. So that is also another challenge, just because of the sheer amount of time some of these systems have been in place.
Yeah.
But we're seeing across the board, almost all our customers leaning in pretty heavily. I don't see anyone today saying, I don't think this is going to happen. If anything, what we are seeing is that customers now are saying, hey, I would like to do this. I'd like to do this next. Can we think about this?
Yeah.
So there's actually more of a leaning in that I'm seeing, than I've seen over the last 20 plus years.
That inspires hope. So that's great. I do want to ask you, instead of past 20 years, sort of not quite 20 years, but looking out ahead, you have a very unique perspective given the breadth of carriers that you work with, and the purview that you have because of that. It's like I'm going to sit down with the CEO of several carriers right now. Where do you think the industry's going? What do you think, sort of 5 years from now will be prevalent things that we're going to be engaging in, or things that you see shifting between now and, 5 or so years out?
I would say, the foundation that the industry has in understanding that there's a complex ecosystem that has to be orchestrated for an individual claim to be processed.
Yeah.
That understanding is very clear. Exactly, Brian, as you pointed out, it's not just what I can do, but how I orchestrate an ecosystem to really get this claim through. So people are really starting to sense that. And I see one large concept that when I look at the industry 5 years out, 10 years out, which is going to be a huge driving force. And that is the concept of straight-through processing. That means, how can I take information a priori before the claim happened? How do I take, telematics data? How do I take, experiential data? How do I take consumer-specific information? How do I blend all of these things in to eliminate a lot of the mundane possibilities and the capabilities that people are doing? I'll give you a case in point that you might find interesting. The number of phone calls to a repair facility or an insurance company or a parts provider saying, where's that part, or where is my car?
Right.
What's happening to my car? When will it be available? Right? We pump out, on behalf of our customers, 50, 60 million text messages that proactively shares the movement of your particular claim across the supply chain.
Yeah.
From parts being ordered, car being at the repair facility, scheduling so we think straight through processing that eliminates more and more of the mundane capabilities, so that the high empathy, the high impact connection point between a human being and a human being is actually maximized.
Yeah. I think this is one where you and I have talked about this before. A lot of us talk about STP. It's not, it's not a new idea, but it's always struck me that it's always an internal view. Is people are thinking about straight through within their four walls. And the reality is, for some kinds of claims, fine. But for so many, and not just auto, but much more broadly than that, and even outside of the property and physical damage world, there's other parties at play. And right now, you can connect so many of those nodes, but as soon as you hit a dead node that can't connect in, the whole thing from a customer standpoint, it's almost worse. It's like everything was great, and then
suddenly,
yeah, and so that gap stands out even more. And so I hope that that you're absolutely right, and I hope it's only 5 years that we get to a place, as a consumer, where with the Domino's pizza tracker idea, where we can tell it's in this phase, and because when people know where they stand, they're so much more at peace. I mean, insurance is about peace of mind. Just that bit of information actually provides as much peace of mind as the check does at the end, because they feel like, okay, I'm being taken care of, and that sense of the insurer is not going to be there for me, and they're going to try to screw me over or whatever. It's you give them that clarity and that status openly, that fear really goes away. I think it's really powerful, and people may not be thinking as broadly in STP that it's got to get outside of your four walls or it's effectively worthless.
I mean, that's exactly right? And that's why we think the years of work to actually build out capabilities across the entire ecosystem that's involved. I think that's a precursor. That's a precursor. Having the network capabilities, having AI on top of this, we think will be very transformative. And we actually see customers very, very excited about it. And not a day goes by, we don't have, we have a new R&D center in Chicago where we can work interactively with people. And we see customers actually leaning in and thinking in a very broad sort of way, how can I really move forward on this journey?
Yeah. Well, I think if there's a theme for this discussion, it's leaning in. I think that's something everyone can take forward. So Githesh, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing about where things are going, starting with the claim, which people know I'm biased. I think that's the most important piece of insurance, but it's great to get some time with you today.
Brian, thanks so much. Great to see you. Be well.
Thank you to Githesh for sitting down and sharing the perspective from CCC. There are a few companies that are that plugged into so many different pieces of, like you said, that entire network of what it takes to deliver insurance services and deliver on the promise of our policies. And so, getting his perspective is really critical. I'm excited to hear about it. And I will say, you caught it with my reaction, but the way he talked about STP, it's not that it was so out of left field, no one would ever think of it, but being in the weeds, I often never did. And those around me who were also working in STP also weren't. We're thinking very four-wall centric, which is helpful. And there's things you can do. And maybe it's an easier place to start. There's value in it. But if we don't go beyond those four walls, really to every wall that we might potentially face, we'll never really get the straight through processing that we should. And, if that's what the next 5 years look like, that would be a great place for us to focus. So really appreciated that, and thinking about how all of the advances we've had on the physical damage world of claims, property, auto, et cetera, how that can inform the casualty side. And let's round out the complete picture instead of, we've always drawn a line between the casualty and the car accident side of a claim for, in many cases, understandable reasons around expertise and maybe conflicts, but you're missing something if you're not able to share that insight. So what if the tools you use could extend the insights from one into the other and help us make better decisions, get people's lives put back together faster, avoid unnecessary payouts, identify problems before they explode, really, making the right decisions early to head off a problem at the pass so that problems don't get worse, injuries don't exacerbate because you didn't intervene the way you should have, when you should have, or could have. There's a ton to that. So I really appreciate Githesh's perspective, given, again, just how much CCC sees. He shared a lot of the stats of the scale of what they're looking at. And I think it's also interesting because it's across carrier and it's across geography and market and type of insured and everything. It's very rare that you get that level of breadth in visibility into the things that drive our performance. So thank you to Githesh. Thank you to the team at CCC for giving him up for a bit. And I hope this sparks some thoughts for all of you, especially to my fellow claims folks out there. This should get you thinking more and more. So take some of these ideas, bring them into your context and see, well, what does that mean for us? How could we navigate that differently? Or, that got me thinking differently about what we face. Maybe there's another way we could try to solve these problems that we're dealing with in our business. I hope all of you took something from this, and I will see you back here next time. Thanks, everyone.